All right, here we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to our second Atlas AMA. I'm Mav. I do marketing and community for Rocket Pool. We have had one of these AMAs before. It is available on YouTube as a recording, but probably a little bit late to catch up now. At least you know where to find it if you want to go back and check some things. And similarly, this Twitter space is being recorded. It will be up on YouTube eventually. The previous AMA was our longest upload. It was almost 2 hours. We'll try and stick to the basics for this one, but Atlas is kind of a big deal and there is a lot to talk about. So we may end up almost hitting that 2 hour mark as well. See how we go. Ken's going to be joining us at some point to help co-host. For those of you who don't know, Ken is one of the rocket scientists, and as well as completing some valuable research for the protocol in the past, he's also currently maintaining the rocket scientist ODAL node. With me up here on the stage is Langers, aka Darren Langley, aka Darren Olive. If you don't understand that joke, I think you need to join the Rocket Pool Discord for more reasons than one. We have had some issues with Twitter Spaces in the past, as I think have a lot of people. So I am looking at full 5G bars, but in the case that the Bird app gives out, we may have to transition over to Discord, the voice chat over there. Fingers crossed that we can keep it here on Twitter Spaces. But if you did understand the Darren Olive joke, then you probably know a lot about Atlas already. We will try to get through a kind of recap early on and then spend a bit more time getting into some more of the details. If you have any questions or comments, you can drop them below this Twitter Space tweet, or of course in trading in the Discord, feel free to tag me at Maverick and we'll get to those questions as much as we can. So with that out of the way, I believe if I've done my maths correctly, we're less than 100 hours away from Atlas. Does that sound right? I think so. Kind of a bit of a scary thought, just like Chapella. It seems to be months and months and months away, and then it's just right around the corner. So, Langers, to kick things off, we've heard a little bit recently about where Atlas is up to. There's been things mentioned about the contracts being verified, the contracts being deployed to mainnet but not live yet. Can you run us through where we are exactly with the Atlas upgrade?
Right, cool. Yeah, um, so we've raised the proposal to the ODAO proposal to apply the upgrade. That was raised a few days ago, and that has like a 7-day delay before the ODAO can actually start voting on it. So we're kind of in like this waiting limbo state, waiting for that to kind of expire. But in the meantime, we've been doing a few things. So we've kind of verified the contract, the upgrade contract, so that it's now kind of visible to everybody. And we'll definitely send out a link to that, or we definitely send it out today. So we've been verified the contracts. We've swapped over the contracts, the Atlas contracts to Immunify. And last night, the RPL rewards tree was generated. So that was kind of like one of the last pieces of the puzzle to be able to properly formalize the release, because we needed the one of the reward interval numbers. So now we can lock that upgrade contract, or apply that interval and lock that contract. And then we'll announce that today, so that everyone can kind of see that we've locked the contract and what the contract is and everything. And then next week, when the proposal expires, or not expires, when the proposal is open for voting, the ODAO will be able to vote, and we've kind of given a heads up that that's coming. They'll have some time to vote on the proposal, and once that succeeds, I'm assuming it's going to succeed, but it is the ODAO. Once it succeeds, it'll the ODAO will actually execute that proposal, which actually doesn't do anything. It incorporates the upgrade proposal into the protocol, and then we have to as the team we have to execute the upgrade, when it's kind of appropriate. So that will be I think it's like UTC, midnight on UTC on the 18th. Yes. I think I'll have to double check that.
Yep, that's right.
It's cool. It's difficult because we live in the future. So that's kind of where the progress is, and what's kind of coming up in the next few days.
Okay, great. So certainly final stretch then for Atlas, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I should have mentioned probably one of the most important things. So all the audits were completed quite a while ago before we raised the proposal. We had one last kind of fix check that Sigma Prime were doing. They completed that this week, and so all of the auditing process has kind of been done now as well.
Okay, great. And we haven't really covered what exactly Atlas is yet. I expect a lot of the audience has some idea, but perhaps we can start to touch on this by discussing what exactly will happen once that big red button is pushed and Atlas is activated and launched. Right now, I guess we're in a kind of an interesting limbo state, right? We've had Chapella, but Atlas is not live. And as we said, in just 100 hours, that will change. What will be some of the immediate things that people might notice, say from the node operator side?
So from the node operator side, the thing you'll notice is, actually pretty much nothing, except the fact that I think a lot of people now are starting to get. I'll give it an overview first, and then I'll dive into that. I think so basically there are two main themes of Atlas, and the first one is withdrawals, so supporting kind of the Chapella hard fork, and then there's also kind of like a scaling thing. So the first thing they'll kind of notice is that now that Chapella is live, validators are starting to get their rewards skimmed. So there will be some ETH sitting. If you've been running a Rocket Pool node for a reasonable amount of time, you'll have kind of some ETH, some juicy rewards sitting in your mini pool. Now you won't be able to access those until we release Atlas. But when we do release Atlas, you'll essentially be able to. You'll have to do two things. You'll have to upgrade your delegate, which is kind of like a one-time thing that you need to do on your mini pool or mini pools. You upgrade your delegate, and then that means you're kind of using the Atlas code. And then once you've upgraded your delegate, you'll be able to distribute your balance. And distributing your balance means that the ETH that's sitting in your mini pool that you've kind of accumulated over the last however months that you've been validating will get kind of split into your share as a node operator, and then rETH holders kind of share as well. And so you'll get the kind of your share of the rewards and your commission. So that's a CLI command that you can issue and start kind of receiving that whenever you want, or you can leave it in your mini pool for a little bit and let it hang out. But that's basically how that kind of section works for partial withdrawals. You'll also be able to fully exit if you want to. So currently, so now that Chapella is live, you can actually exit, and you'll become withdrawable, and eventually all of your ETH will end up back in your mini pool. In which case, you'll be able to do like the close process and close your mini pool and exit with your kind of 16 ETH. So that's kind of like the withdrawal side of things. conscious I've been talking for a little bit, but the next part is kind of like the scaling part. So essentially, what we're doing is lowering the barrier of entry for node operators. So we'll be lowering the barrier of entry from 16 ETH. So you'll need a minimum of 16 ETH today, but after Atlas, you'll only need 8. So what will become available is obviously being able to deposit 8 ETH mini pools, and so that that will be coming as soon as Atlas is live. So you'll be able to deposit 8 ETH plus a minimum of 2.4 ETH worth of RPL, and then you'll be able to spin up a mini pool. So that's kind of one thing. But also, if you already have a 16 ETH mini pool, then you can also migrate that mini pool. So you can migrate your 16 ETH mini pool to an 8 ETH mini pool. And so that process is open for existing node operators as well. And then the last kind of piece of that scaling puzzle is that solo stakers can actually migrate their keys over to Rocket Pool. So essentially they can migrate their 32 ETH validator to essentially you migrate it to an 8 ETH mini pool, but then you get like a 24 ETH credit. So it means that you can essentially get 4 8 ETH mini pools out of your kind of 32 ETH validator. And there's lots of reasons why you want to do that. Mainly that you earn more because of the commission that you get on the ETH that you're staking on behalf of liquid stakers.
It's great to see some of the on-chain activity already suggesting people are potentially positioning to take advantage of this opportunity. Good to see that we've got Ken up here now. We're starting to get into a few of the more technical details. I'll just ask one follow-up question to Langers on this topic, and then hand it over to Ken to help host the rest of the call. But on that concept of migrating across, if you currently have a 32 ETH solo validator or validators, there's an important thing to remember to make sure you're eligible for the migration process, right, in terms of the withdrawal credentials. Maybe you could quickly run us through that.
Yeah, so you have to have a 0x0 credential, which is known as a BLS withdrawal credential. So there are 2 types of withdrawal credential that you can use as a solo validator. There's 0x0, which is the BLS one, or 0x01, and that's like an Ethereum address. To be eligible for this kind of migration, you need to have that 0x0 BLS key. That's kind of like the only thing that's actually necessary for the process to work. The process is kind of like a 2-step process. There's actually a few steps, but the smart node kind of handles it for you, and that is that it kind of creates a mini pool for you, and then it migrates over you can import your keys into Rocket Pool, and then it'll kind of migrate your withdrawal credential over to your Rocket Pool mini pool, and then it kind of sets all that up for you. Obviously, you still need to go through the process of shutting down your solo staker and making sure that it is shut down. That's a key component of that. So please read the instructions carefully, so that you don't end up getting double signing and getting slashed. That's an important thing. So make sure you shut down your solo staker before you kind of migrate over, because you don't want to run it in 2 places. But I think the instructions kind of go through that, and kind of a safe process for doing that. But yeah, so that's the process.
We certainly don't want to see repeats of earlier today where even some quote-unquote professional node operators, the best and most rational among functionalities. So don't let that happen to you. I just had a concerning pop-up from Twitter. So can we just do a quick mic check before we continue? Can you hear me okay, Langers?
Yeah, I can hear you. You dropped out very minimally, but it was fine.
Okay. Well, all going well, we can get Ken up here. Can you hear us, Ken?
Yeah, I hear you. And how's it going? I apologize for being late here, but very excited to be here.
Oh, no worries at all. We've just kind of been covering off a brief introduction, and thanks for coming along at a relatively short notice. You did such a great job last time. So, yeah, looking forward to repeating some of what we covered in the previous AMA, but I guess there's also a few more details and specifics. We've got dates and times. We've already had Chapala, so perhaps there may be some different or new questions from the audience. Nothing coming through just yet, so we can probably continue chatting about some of the specific things that Atlas enables. So the topics we still have to cover around creating new LEB8s from scratch, maybe a little bit more on the conversion process, and then what it means for the liquid stakers. But if you're happy to take over from here, Ken,
Yeah.
you can go.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to kind of ask a couple of questions to Langers that I think would be helpful to, have some folks kind of focus on. And one of those things that you were just talking about was the mini pool contract and the upgrades, right? Because if you think about it now, post Shanghai here and soon to be post Atlas, right, coming up on Monday for me, that mini pools are either going to be of two types, right? Either somebody's going to make a new mini pool, it could be an 8 LEB or it could be a 16 ETH one, or they're going to create a vacant mini pool contract to do the solo node migration. And in both of those cases, right, they're going to get the new delegate as kind of their default or base delegate, right? But for many of the node operators listening on this call right now, they're going to want to, or they may be interested in converting their half 16 mini pool, right, and doing a bond reduction and making 2 LEB8s out of it, right? And there's going to be the need for a delegate there, and some of the ways that they could either form a new one or do that, right? They'll have existing mini pools that they'll have to bring to the latest delegate contract. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about that, like maybe walk us back a little bit, like what is this delegate contract, right? We've never really used it before. It's the first time we're using it. We really can't use this first version, but maybe explain it a little bit more and just walk through the steps that an existing node operator would have to do to either withdraw or do a bond reduction on this thing.
Yeah, that's a great question actually. So when we deployed Rocket Pool, withdrawals wasn't really a thing. But we knew kind of roughly what the mechanism was going to look like, but we didn't really know what the mechanism would fully look like. So we implemented in the current version, we implemented kind of a withdrawal mechanism that we, to our best of knowledge at the time, was going to work. And to be fair, to a certain degree, it would work with the current delegate. But for example, partial withdrawals was something that was added after we launched to mainnet. So we had to kind of like include that. We also changed the way that the actual withdrawals are done. Previously, the ODAO was much more involved in kind of gating this process, and we wanted to kind of remove that process as well. So, and both from an efficiency perspective and just from the fact that we didn't want the ODAO putting their noses into withdrawals. So, in both those cases, we decided to create a new delegate, or we had to create a new delegate actually. And what a new delegate is basically, so the mini pool contract is what we call a proxy. So it's kind of like you have your contract, but the code can actually is actually upgradable. Now it's opt-in upgradable, which means that as a node operator, you opt into the upgrade. So it's not us kind of like forcing the upgrade onto you or anything necessarily, but you kind of like opt into the upgrade. So that's how kind of like the upgrade process works, is that the node operator is in kind of that control of doing that. Now, what that means is it means that you do have to kind of like opt into this upgrade to be able to use the new features that we're releasing. And obviously those new features are particularly kind of withdrawals or partial withdrawals or full withdrawals, and bond reductions if you want to do a bond reduction. Those things are in this new code that we're deploying for Atlas. And so by kind of upgrading your delegate, you're essentially upgrading your mini pool to be Atlas compliant.
Okay, and let me see if I understand that correctly. That let's just say I've got a 16 ETH mini pool. I'm very happy with it. Maybe it's a 20% commission. And what I want to do is just keep it for a while, maybe see how things settle out a little bit. But I want to get those ETH rewards that came across as part of the consensus layer and the skimming, the partial withdrawals, right? I'm going to need to upgrade. I can't distribute those funds without upgrading to the latest mini pool delegate, right? And there's two ways I could do that. I could either upgrade to it, or I could set a setting to use the latest delegate. Do you want to just confirm my understanding of that and maybe walk us through the choice between, do I upgrade the delegate or do I just opt into using the latest?
Yeah, so the upgrade mechanism, as it said, has kind of like two facets to it. So you can there's basically a flag that you can say, for this mini pool, I want to use you always want to use the latest delegate, and so that is definitely a kind of a choice that you can make. And what it will mean is you can set that after. Actually, people who have it set now will instantly get the new delegate. But if you set it later, you'll get it at the point when you set it. So you do have those two choices. Now, I mean, the only real difference between those two things is that obviously with the opt-in, with the manual opt-in, you're kind of manually, I guess, acknowledging you're upgrading that to Atlas, and so there's this kind of like confirmation point that you've chosen to upgrade. And now with the set latest, in this current case, yes, it will kind of like just upgrade to Atlas. But if we release another delegate going down the line, then it will also do that one, which may be what you want. It's certainly easier that way. It just means that that you'll always have the latest code. But there may be people who don't want to do that, or feel that they want to upgrade step by step. To be honest, we're not going to be doing upgrades often, so either way is kind of perfectly fine.
And one question that came up in trading earlier was, people even right now pre-Atlas, people can set the flag to use the latest delegate now or over the weekend when gas is cheap, and they'll be all ready. They don't have to wait for Atlas to use that setting, correct?
That is correct.
But if
yes.
they want to go the other route and actually just opt in one by one on each delegate, they have to wait till Atlas has been activated and on Monday on the 18th here, and then upgrade to that delegate, right? They can't do that pre-Atlas.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
Okay. And then, so then the next question kind of comes is, maybe when Atlas comes, right? I understand that, the contracts have been uploaded. They haven't been locked yet because we were waiting for the final block number that the award was calculated on. So that could be, I guess, manually added into the contracts that are deployed. And then presumably, and I apologize, I haven't looked yet to see if they've been locked yet today. But now there's going to be, I guess, an ODAO vote that comes up, and kind of walk us through when the vote comes in, how quickly will deployment happen after the vote, or walk us up to maybe the hours and minutes before that deployment, what needs to be done, and then what actually happens when it's deployed. Like what can we do and what can we not do? Like, I'm guessing we'll see people that want LEB8s can come in with fresh 8 ETH, or maybe they actually distribute on their mini pool contracts after upgrading them, and they could form. But the bond reductions, there's another wait period, right? I forget if that's 12 hours, 24 hours. Maybe walk us through just a little bit in foreshadowing here. So let's rewind a little bit and tell us what needs to happen to actually launch this Atlas.
Yeah, so what will happen is the proposal will come up for voting it's actually on Monday, but a lot of people Sunday night. It'll come up for voting. We've kind of given the ODAO a heads up, and we'll kind of give them another heads up today, and so that they'll be kind of ready for voting. They'll vote. Now we've kind of given them 24 hours to do that voting, so that's why we've kind of given them the heads up. So they'll have like 24 hours to kind of do the vote. Once we get quorum, which is I think it's currently 10 votes now. 10 votes now. So once we get 10 votes in, then that means that the vote is successful. And the vote can actually be, or the proposal can actually be executed. That then incorporates the upgrade proposal into the protocol. It's waiting really for us to then execute the actual upgrade at the right time. So at I think it's midnight UTC on the 18th, we will then execute that proposal, that upgrade contract, which will then kind of apply those changes to the protocol. Then your kind of node software will detect that Atlas is launched, and it'll kind of go into like the post Atlas mode, where all the other stuff kind of opens up. So then from then on, you can, if you go to deposit, it'll come up with an 8 ETH option. If you the options for bond reduction will all be there. With bond reduction, as you mentioned, there is we call it like a scrub period. So what's that doing? What that is doing? So bond reduction is a two-phase process. So you essentially call begin bond reduction on your mini pool, and once you've upgraded or set the latest, you then call begin bond reduction, and then it kind of like starts a timer, and then it's actually 12. The scrub period is 12 hours, and then so over that 12 hours, the ODAO is just going to assess that you haven't been scrubbed, you haven't been slashed or anything. Your validator is still active, and that the balance is basically what you've kind of said it is. Run your validator, obviously, for that kind of 12 hours, and then your node will automatically do the final piece, the second part of the bond reduction, which is the actual bond reduction itself, and that will kick off after the 12 hours. So make sure you kind of keep an eye on that, but that'll kind of like kick off the bond reduction, and then what will happen there is you'll have now an 8 ETH mini pool, and you'll have an 8 ETH credit, which you can then use to spin up new mini pools. So that credit will kind of sit there, and you'll be able to do another deposit, but you won't need to provide any additional ETH for that 8 ETH mini pool. You can just use that. You may need to have more RPL depending on what your RPL collateral ratio is, but you can then do this 8 ETH deposit.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let me see if I've captured this and understood it correctly, which is, so as soon as Atlas launches, right, you've actually deployed and executed the code, right? Our smart node stack has detected it and now gives us options. For those that are fortunate enough to have 8 ETH lying around and so wish to do so, they could immediately rush in and form an 8 ETH LEB8, right? And that would process, presumably even as quickly as the next block.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah. So so that'll kind of like come into play.
And then for the rest of us that have 16 ETH mini pools and decide that we'd like to kind of double down and form 2 LEB8s, right? We could issue those bond reduction transactions again as early as the next block after the Atlas deployment or activation execution, I should say, right? And then that would start this again 12-hour scrub period to be able to be cleared to finally reduce the bond, right? So we won't really see the mini pool conversions until 12. I mean, we'll see the bond reduction transactions, but we won't see the reduced bond transaction, the second part that has to be done until 12 hours after a successful clearing of the scrub period.
That's right. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Okay. And then, presumably if we see a lot of interest there, I mean, a lot of people I think are trying to figure out, I'll call it strategies or optimizations, right? I mean, it's been pointed out again, even as all the way back to launch, that because it's a smart contract-based staking protocol, even for node operators, that there's kind of an advantage to waiting until gas prices are more reasonably, just to reduce the overhead cost of either converting or creating one of these things, right? But then on the same side, there's dynamics about, well, there has to be some liquidity in the deposit pool, and maybe we should talk a little bit about some of the nuances there. But we're fortunate right now because we've increased the limits, right? There's 18,000 ETH in there, and that will feed a lot of mini pools, including LEB8. So there's a little bit of incentive, I think, for people to go ahead and convert early, because there's deposit ETH in there to match with, right? So you can get real quick back into the staking game, right? You're not stuck in a queue. But what are some of those factors that we should kind of think about? I mean, obviously not financial advice and so forth, but just from your point of view, what are some of the considerations that a node operator might want to do about either rushing in at the opening, or maybe waiting to play out a little bit for gas prices? Or some have even commented, perhaps we'll go node operator lean again, and we'll see an ARB. I don't necessarily know if I subscribe to that theory because of the mechanisms now that are introduced, but what are some of your thoughts on this, or what are some of the factors you feel that node operators should at least consider if it's not advice?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a few things. So actually, just to kind of touch on the mechanism. So migrating from 16 to 8. You don't need any additional. There's no additional ETH that's taken from the deposit pool because it's all being staked at the moment, and it's just basically an accounting change, because it just gives you this 8 ETH credit. But when you then use that credit, it requires at least 1 ETH worth of 1 ETH in the deposit pool to be able to do that. You're not actually kind of providing the ETH, but it requires 1 ETH in the pool to do that, the kind of like pre-deposit that we do. So so ETH will need to be in the deposit pool. Now, as you said, there's 18,000 ETH in there at the moment, which is, yeah, it's a fair amount. I think there's an opportunity for node operators to kind of soak that up, and so that will be kind of one thing that people might want to do. One of the things we did see though is that there's a few things that demand could definitely continue on. Obviously, we've got the fact that Shapello is now live, and so there's a much much more de-risked kind of Ethereum staking now. We'll kind of see that probably playing out a little bit more in the kind of next few weeks and months, but that should increase the demand kind of naturally. Obviously, that's not a given, but that's kind of what we're expecting. The other thing is, this is the demand on the rETH side of things. The other thing is that when we did increase the limit, there's still quite a lot of latent demand for rETH. We increased the limit, and some of it increased because of the premium, and there's our bots kind of taking advantage of that, but that ran out quite quickly, and so there was, I think it was from about 8,000 onwards, it was all just demand. So that's definitely something that to kind of bear in mind, is that there is still a fair amount of rETH demand. Also the IMC and the IMC in general are kind of incentivizing liquidity, and so that's another kind of driving factor. We've obviously got loads of integrations that are in place, and the thing with kind of MetaMask as well. So all of those things drive demand for rETH. That said, there's a lot of 16 minipools to migrate, and so we could burn through that quite quickly. But so there is a bit of a kind of a game to play there, I guess. Is do you kind of like jump in and try to get some of the 18,000 ETH that's already in the deposit pool, or do you kind of like wait to see how the demand kind of comes in over the next weeks? I can't really make that call for you guys, but what I'm saying is that there are a lot of factors that play into the fact that we will have reasonable or even strong demand for rETH over the next kind of weeks and months.
You there, Ken?
Helps if I turn the mute button off here. Sorry about that. I was going to say, yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and come up on the stage here. But if not, I'll keep asking questions to kind of explore this a little bit more. Langers, you had mentioned that when you do the bond reduction from a 16 ETH mini pool, it doesn't matter if there's any ETH in the deposit pool, whether it's full, half full, empty, right? You can go ahead and initiate that bond reduction, begin it, and then actually reduce the bond. And what you end up with is a mini pool at the end, kind of your upgraded mini pool, that you're earning just on 8 ETH plus your 14% commission on 24, and a credit, 8 ETH of credit that you can use again. But you're not really earning anything on that 8 ETH of credit until you go ahead and you actually cash it back in, right? And you turn that in and deposit it again to get your second LEB8, right? So there's a little bit of incentive for not holding on that. Otherwise, you're just holding non-productive or non-yield earning ETH, right? And so tell us a little bit about the dynamics. What are the rules in redeeming that 8 ETH credit for another LEB? Does there have to be ETH in the deposit pool? And if so, how much? And help me kind of understand the rules in that I could factor that into my conversion plan.
Yeah. So, and now I'm kind of going back to when I was kind of testing everything. So there needs to be at least one ETH in the deposit pool to do the pre-deposit. Um, Now there's two different there's two different things with the mini pool. There's kind of obviously the initial deposit, and then there's it being assigned ETH, enough ETH to be staked, and they're kind of like to get a mini pool into pre-launch, which is the first stage. You need to have at least one ETH in the deposit pool. Once it's kind of in, that's initialized. To initialize a mini pool, you need at least one ETH, and then to get it into pre-launch, which means it's being assigned deposits, there needs to be the full 32 in there. Now, the way that the mini pool queue works is a bit different now, and it's a little bit less intuitive, to be honest, but it is much more efficient. So it's a bit tricky to kind of like mix bond reductions and non-bond reductions, but essentially, I'll keep it simple and just I'll keep it simple and say that when you deposit an 8 ETH mini pool, it'll do like a pre-deposit of 1 ETH, but then it'll need a further 31 ETH to actually get into pre-launch. And so but it will be in the queue as an initialized mini pool, and then eventually it will kind of be assigned the further 31 ETH to actually become a pre-launch mini pool.
Yeah, and it is. I know it's a tough question to kind of address, especially to explain over the phone here, right, on Twitter Spaces. But it's sort of like, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're coming in with an 8 ETH, right? It always takes 1 ETH and creates the mini pool contract and deposits that into the beacon chain, and it does that to lock the withdraw credential, right? To lock the address that we're going to exit out to be that mini pool contract. This was the whole kind of vulnerability that delayed the initial launch, right? When we didn't realize you needed to put that in to lock it, right? And then what's been improved a little bit is instead of just holding that 8 ETH kind of unproductive in the mini pool contract, right, waiting for the protocol ETH to be paired with it, it actually deposits that now into the deposit pool and kind of assigns it to the next node operator in line, right? Just to use as much ETH coming into the protocol to keep that line moving as possible, right? And eventually, when my mini pool that I deposited on gets to the front of the node operator line, I'll be matched because it already has 1 ETH in the locked in the deposit contract, right? It will find the next 31 ETH, assign that protocol ETH to it, and it now has 32. 1 plus 31 is 32. And I'll be given a share of that mini pool. If I'm going in at an 8 ETH mini pool, I get an 8 ETH share plus commission. If I went in with a 16 ETH, then it gives me a 16 ETH share in a commission, right? But one of the interesting things of it, right, that is kind of interesting is if you're doing the bond, if you're just coming in with cold hard cash or ether, right, it's pretty clear you can come in at any time, you get in the line, and when it's your turn, you go, right? But if you're coming in with a credit, because that credit is just I'll call it a paper credit or an electronic credit, right? There's really no ETH in that transaction, right? It's just a credit. In order to cash that 8 ETH coupon, right, or the credit for your next LEB8, there has to be at least 1 ETH in the deposit pool, because that's what it's going to use to lock your withdrawal credential, right? So I can't really cash in my coupon unless there's 1 ETH in that deposit pool. So that might be a factor people play in. I mean, if there's not an ETH, I just wait it out until there is an ETH. If there's 12 ETH, there's at least 1 ETH, I can cash it in. But I kind of need that 1 ETH in that deposit pool to keep going.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, so that's correct. Yeah, you need that kind of 1 ETH for the pre-deposit.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's going to play a factor in terms of people redeem. Do they wait till they're like, oh, I think 12 hours from now like right now it's got 18,000 ETH. We're probably fine 12 hours from now, maybe. I don't know. It took 12 hours to go from whatever it was to 18, so it's probably safe. But, if it has low ETH in there, there is just that little bit of chance that if you do a bond conversion, there may or may not be some ETH. But as long as deposits keep coming in, there's, somebody's going to eventually drop an ETH in there, or we'll get to an ETH, and then you'll be good.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, that's correct. And you'll be at that point, your mini pool will be kind of initialized, and it'll kind of be waiting for like deposits to come in, and the way that the mini pool queue works now is actually much more efficient in the sense that there are kind of like two sources of funds that your mini pool could get. The first one is of the obvious one, which is rETH being deposited. rETH deposits. So ETH coming in from rETH deposits. So that's kind of the one that happens now. But post Atlas, there's a kind of like an efficiency improvement where your mini pool could actually get funded by other node operators depositing ETH as well. And so with that, it means that we can get this kind of like faster or more efficient way of getting mini pools funded quicker, because we're using both the rETH deposits and the ETH that other node operators are kind of like depositing to kind of, but basically the person at the front of the queue receives the ETH that the new node operators are putting in. And so it just means that we get this faster processing of the mini pools.
Yeah, I think that will play a key role. I mean, it's funny. I don't know how many people have been along this long in Rocket Pool, but I definitely remember the days, shortly after all the stage launches, where there were just lots of node operators in the queue, and it would seem like it would be days. I mean, they were always moving. There was a metric system to track your position in the queue, but it did seem like it was a very long wait in line. I mean, it was probably shorter than I remember, but whenever you're waiting in a line, it just seems to take forever to go forward. So flashbacks of the DMV were certainly coming. One other thing that might be worth talking about is we're just talking a little bit about strategies as to when to convert, right? Gas prices, deposit pool ETH. Maybe one of the things you could talk about a little bit is some of these consensus layer rewards that are coming back, and I suppose even some of the execution layer rewards coming back are when we distribute from our mini pool contract, right? We take our share and we give back our ethers their share. They're actually not going into the deposit pool, right? They're going into the rETH contract, and there's a setting in there that then spills over to the deposit pool. Can you just walk us through a little bit about maybe the flow chart about what happens to the rETH share, and what is this rETH contract? How do I burn or cash out from there? And when does it start spilling over in the deposit pool? How does the money flow work on that side of the house?
Yeah, so what happens is when you call distribute balance on your mini pool, and so you've got I don't know, maybe 2 ETH in there, you're burning a hole in your pocket, and you want to kind of access that. And so what you do is you call, node operator calls distribute balance on that mini pool, and it will split it into the appropriate shares. So node operators will get their share of the rewards plus the commission that they've earned, and rETH holders will obviously get their share of the rewards, which is minus the commission. The ETH that actually gets sent to the rETH contract, and the rETH contract is literally the token contract, and the rETH token contract. But in there's like a function that's called there's a parameter called the rETH target collateral. rETH collateral target. You need to get it the right way around. And that's essentially a percentage of the total supply of rETH. So what that says is that we are going to kind of hold back a certain percentage of the rETH supply to, or up to a certain percentage, for withdrawals. So currently that's set to 1%. So it means that there's going to be some ETH sitting in the, in fact, there is ETH sitting in there now. I think there's something like 500 ETH in the rETH contract today, mainly because there's not a lot of withdrawals going on. Everyone's depositing. So that is in the contract, but when it hits kind of 1% and higher, or well, anything above 1%, then when you kind of like distribute your balance, or if I think it also happens when the rewards tree and stuff happens because of the smoothing pool, and that I think that happens then as well. What will happen is that ETH will go into the rETH contract, and it'll assess whether it's above 1%, and then anything above 1% actually gets what we call recycled into the deposit pool. Now, that kind of parameter setting has an interesting kind of trade-off, because obviously the higher that percentage is, the more we have for withdrawals. There's more that we've kind of have for withdrawals, but it's not earning kind of commission. Oh, sorry, it's not earning rewards because it's sitting in the rETH contract. So obviously, then the lower it is, the more we are recycling ETH into the deposit pool, and so the more that we are, the more rewards that we're actually generating because we're recycling the ETH. And so there is this kind of like balance of trade-off. We want enough in there to support kind of decent withdrawals, and actually withdrawals has two things. So you can withdraw. So let's say, for example, there's 500 ETH in the rETH contract today, and you wanted to do like a 1,000 ETH withdrawal. It would actually take it from the rETH contract and what's in the deposit pool. So it actually kind of like splits it between the two. So that it provides, so the deposit pool and the rETH contract is actually the full amount of withdrawal space, I guess, what we have. But it does mean that there's this kind of, essentially this parameter is a trade-off between withdrawal, the amount that we're kind of keeping aside for withdrawals, and the amount that we're recycling to earn more rewards. And that's really kind of the APR of rETH. It means that by doing that, we're kind of trading off the APR for rETH. Hopefully that makes sense.
There, Ken?
Yeah, sorry, boy, I keep forgetting that button there. I was going to say maybe it is worth exploring that just a second more here. So you mentioned that there's a setting in there, right? I'm looking at the Rocket Pool Explorer now, and it's I think it's the one called the rETH collateral rate. It's set at 1%, right? This was one of the changes that were made in the pre-Atlas setting changes that got passed by an RPIP proposal, right? So it sets at 1%, and Langers, you're telling us it's 1% of I know.
I'm losing Cam.
Yeah, we just lost you there briefly, Ken.
Oh, wait, sorry, did you hear me here? There, the question was, I know it's a 1% that is the value. But what is it 1% of? Is it 1% of the ETH value of rETH, or the ETH value? Like, what is it 1% of?
That is a great question. And I'm pretty sure it's. Hang on, I can have a look at the contract. But so to be able to describe it
it's
properly,
okay. Nashua is typing and trading right now.
he will be answering it, or they will be answering it for me. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Joshua.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Doofus has another one that wasn't so helpful here, but
is that right?
Yeah, rETH.
Classic.
Yeah, it's so 1% of the rETH supply, right? And so I guess that's the ETH equivalence of all the rETH that was minted.
That's right. I think so. Yeah,
that's in there. And so and so in order, all these inflows, because they're basically inflows, right? They're execution layer rewards from the the distributors, or the distributor contracts, or the smoothing pools, right? They're the rETH share of that. They're the rETH holders share of any of our mini pool distributions that we'll be able to pull from post Atlas after we upgrade our mini pool delegate. And they're all directed towards the rETH contract, right? So it's kind of like a reserve account, right? The only use you can do with that ETH, it's non-productive, it's a drag on the APR. The only use you can do with it is A, either let it sit there, or B, redeem rETH back for ETH. It's exclusively reserved for that. And when it reaches this threshold, 1%, right, then that's when it overflows or overspills back to the deposit pool. So we're basically ensuring, in most cases, there is going to be at protocol ETH that you can cash out rETH for, right? Is that a fair summary?
That is a much better summary than mine. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So one of the strategies that keeps coming up about like when to convert or not, I keep hearing people dreaming of the days of Rocket Arb coming back, right? Like, oh, we're going to see a huge premium on rETH. But in order for that premium to come, the demand for rETH has to outstrip both the node operator supply, which I think is very doable, right? Even with LEB8s, right? But it's also got to outstrip the inflow of ETH into that deposit contract. Otherwise, our bots are going to eat up the NER before it spills over, so that a node operator can execute on it, right?
Just quickly to jump in, it looks like we've got a couple of requests to speak.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we can get them up on the stage if you guys have a couple of questions. I think Johan Spud was first.
Hey guys, thank you for this space. Exciting times for ETH and Rocket Pool. Congrats to the team for pulling off Atlas on time. Related to this most recent few questions, I saw some updates from other communities that there will be kind of automated restaking option. So I'm not sure if that was already explained. I don't quite understand it yet. What can node operators do to somehow opt in restaking with rewards that are already in the withdrawal account?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a fair question. So there's probably two aspects to that. There's the ETH and RPL. So RPL is already you can kind of like, there's a mechanism for restaking RPL, but for ETH there kind of isn't. So it's much trickier with ETH. So there's not really like an automatic mechanism for restaking that. Obviously, the ETH will actually end up in your withdrawal address, and then you kind of have a choice of what you want to do. You can either kind of swap for rETH, and in which case you'll be kind of restaking that way. And this also depends on how much ETH that you have. If you've got enough for more mini pools, then that's definitely something that you want to consider. But if it's less than that, then you can do rETH from your withdrawal address, or you can send it to your node address, and if it's enough to create more mini pools, then kind of do that.
Yeah, appreciate it. A couple of related follow-up notes, if I may. Do you have the time for that?
Sure.
Okay. So one is that there is inconvenience from a tax perspective, right? As long as the withdrawal rewards keep accumulating in the mini pool, but they're not recognized back to a personal wallet, you can make an argument that's not taxable event, right? So that's one potential inconvenience to think about. Another one is that it just takes multiple steps, right, to withdraw it, then go, go through the step to set up a new mini pool. And as you said, they have to be, somebody has to keep an eye on, is there enough to create a new mini pool? So in that period of time, which would depend between sole stakers, but it can be potentially a significant amount of time, could be weeks, months, whatever, depends on how much you're staking, of course. That'll be just kind of sitting there, passive rewards that are not doing any meaningful work for the node operator or for, I guess, decentralization, whatever. But there has been some.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're breaking up there.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. There were some discussions about potentially looking at some sort of DVT or a similar way for operators, for node operators to pull together into staking pools to secure a bond, so that the creation of new mini pools is a more smoother curve.
I can't hear you now, but
All right, it's okay. I'll do it on the forums. I'll follow up on the forums. No worries.
yeah,
On the Discord server.
I think I get the kind of angles there. So, in terms of the efficiency of restaking, I mean that definitely is a protocol change. So definitely bring it up on the forum, because it can then feed into the kind of like product development process. As you said, I mean that is something that would have to be kind of changed at the protocol level. In terms of like DVT and I missed kind of like the connection there. We are definitely looking into DVT. We'll be going into kind of like a research phase once Atlas is out the door, kind of like a research and planning phase. And so DVT is definitely on the list for diving into.
Oh, that's excellent to hear, Langers. One other thing that was kind of brought up that maybe could be part of the research thing is, right now the original vision of Rocket Pool was that each mini pool has kind of a different setting, a different node commission, right? But now with kind of a fixed node commission, one of the thoughts is why do we need separate mini pool contracts, one for each validator? Could we, like a fee distributor or something like that, could we just have a single account that could be used for the withdrawal credentials and all these things, so it's a little bit more gas efficient for all these micro skim rewards to go into? Maybe that's something else that the research team could look at.
Yeah, we've definitely been talking about that. That's the direction that we would like to go. I think, and I'll need to double check why, but I think we're reliant on the beacon chain state route for that. But I can double check with them with Kane. But that is definitely something that we are kind of thinking about. It makes a lot of sense in terms of it makes a lot of sense for lots of different reasons. But so we are doing that. That's kind of like part of it. There's a whole heap of I guess research areas that we kind of have in mind, and so we'll kind of lay them out and then see what people are kind of interested in.
Yeah, excellent questions, Invalin. I see that Johan, you're also a speaker up here. Sorry, I'm not a co-host, so couldn't see the hands earlier. But Johan, if you're available, go ahead, ask your questions, please.
Oh, I had no question. I don't know how I got up here, but hi, how's it going?
Oh, good. Sorry, I saw you were up.
Yeah, no, take me down. You guys are doing a great job. It's good hearing everyone.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Invalin, what about you? Did your cell phone reception come back? Did you had maybe a third question and all?
I'm not sure if it's back here sitting up parking lots because the kid has practice. Don't have much option right now. Can you hear me or not?
Yeah, loud and clear. So go ahead if you have another question.
Oh, okay. Miracles of wireless. Yeah, I mean that was mainly Langers kind of understood where I was going, and I'll bring up more on the research channel. But it was mainly around this sort of how can we actually achieve the effects of compounding rewards if we somehow are able to pull together rewards from established node operators that are already bonding and have proven and they have locked in bonds for at least one mini pool. So let them work with other node operators who have rewards to pull and create a new mini pool, right? Something along these lines. But it's a longer conversation. That's just some ideas I wanted to validate quickly.
Yeah, and it certainly makes sense. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's. I just want to congratulate again the team. The upgrade went super smooth, super fast, no issues whatsoever. I've only had 3 or 4 missed attestations since the upgrades about 48 hours ago. So looking great. Congrats, team.
Cool. Thank you very much. I think the client teams did most of the heavy lifting on that, but Joe's done a lot of work with making sure that all the latest kind of clients behave nicely with the CLI and that sort of thing, and he's also kind of gone through and revamped all the documentation or a lot of the documentation. So it's definitely a lot of work to get there, but it's good to hear that.
Yeah, and a shout out to Ken and to Joe for smoothing out the standardization of hardware, so I don't have to be tinkering with parts anymore in the future. That was fun to do one or two times, but after that it becomes a chore. So very convenient that I can get a box from either of you two.
Yeah, glad to help out however we can. But yeah, you can only enjoy building computers so much, right? Mav, do we have any other folks with questions with their hands up?
Not right now. So the floor is yours.
Oh, okay, good. And I guess I didn't know how long we had scheduled this one for here, realizing we're past the hour, but I think this was an additional longer one AMA. So I encourage anyone with their hands either to post in trading or come up on stage here. But Darren, since you kind of approached the ideal, right? I think we've covered, unless you can think of anything on Atlas that we really haven't talked about. I think we've covered the major aspects. But let me know if there's something with Atlas you want to explore more. But you'd somewhat hinted, and I thought maybe it might be kind of interesting to just explore a little bit here. It's just the days and the weeks after Atlas. You kind of talked a little bit about doing some strategic envisioning with a roadmap, with some items of research. But I kind of feel like I was thinking about this morning that, this really is kind of the end of the merge. And for most of us, all of Rocket Pool, I think, has been about the merge, right? Allowing a proof of stake, allowing a open source and permissionless staking pool in proof of stake, doing the merge. And now I was just kind of realizing that the merge is kind of over. So what next? It's the end of an era for Rocket Pool, right?
Yeah, it definitely is an end of a being incomplete. It's like proof of stake with Chapella, proof of stake is now complete. It's kind of from an end-to-end process perspective. I mean, there's kind of like, I think there's refinements and all of that sort of thing to be going on, and there's a whole heap of stuff that the core devs are kind of working on. But from a proof of stake staking mechanism, Chapella rounds that out completely. So that's fantastic. But what that also means, by extension, it also means that Rocket Pool is end to end and it's complete as well. So I say complete, and I want to put air quotes around it, because there's so much that we could do. There's so many things that there's so many things that improvements we can make and all of this sort of thing. We do have to be very mindful that protocol changes are kind of risky, so we will do them. We'll make changes kind of as kind of like sparingly, I guess, as possible. But we also need to kind of keep moving forward and keep developing and keep kind of improving. And so yeah, no, the next kind of I think the next 6 months is going to be quite fun, in the sense that, or even in 3 months, because we'll kind of be back in that research and development mode again. And analysis and all this sort of thing, to kind of see where we're going next, what are the issues that we need to tackle, it's going to be interesting to see what the market dynamics is going to be like over the next few months, because obviously now Chapella is live. There's a few more kind of like competitors that are incoming as well. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how that stuff plays out, and how we can then move with that in terms of our roadmap and research and that sort of thing.
Anything, and I know maybe you got to take a no comment on all these things, but like any thoughts about what might be next? I mean, we saw that on the test net that EigenLayer started to integrate Rocket Pool. Are there, and that just, I mean, I've never seen such demand for Gorilla ETH ever, right? I mean, Object's pulling his hairs out trying to fire up mini pools every 2 seconds. Like what are we hearing there? Is that still going, or can you talk about that? And then I keep hearing a couple of drops. I even saw some code language that referred to LEB4s. What are we thinking there? Anything you can share on that, or any bread that we can pull out today?
If I'm completely honest, I'm trying not to put like there's I think the first step is getting everything down, or all the things kind of written down, and out into the community. I'm trying not to I guess I have kind of some opinions on which way we need to go and what we need to do. But if I'm completely honest, I want the kind of roadmap to be a co-developed process this time around, rather than just us kind of coming up with it. Obviously, we will definitely be heavily involved, because we need to kind of figure out, particularly from like a feasibility perspective, we need to figure out what's actually feasible. But I think there'll be kind of like 2 pipelines. Maybe there'll be like a research pipeline and a development pipeline, and that is going to be but I'm trying not to throw my opinion around too much yet, because I do want this to be a kind of like a community developed process, rather than us just handing down like a stone tablet.
Yeah, I highly commend you for that approach, and I actually think the collective knowledge of our community members is definitely something that can very much help guide that.
Exactly.
That process and so forth. And I know the team has just been, completely full throttle here to get us through Atlas. I think everything's in place for the launch. It's hopefully going to go very successfully here. So, and I'm sure they're due for a little bit of respite, but. In your ideal plan, I mean, when would you like to kind of start those strategic plannings or input from the community, or kind of how do you envision that? Some
some more in-depth AMA calls or just discussions in there, or like what should people be getting excited about that brainstorming, the vision ahead for Deneb and Cancun and I guess Rocket Pool and all these integrations that might be coming.
So as soon as Atlas is kind of live, there'll be some kind of like hypercare and stuff that we need to do afterwards, just to make sure everything's going well. Some kind of like tweaking and that sort of thing. We're doing that at the moment, just to make sure that we're kind of monitoring things and we have enough in place for that. But once Atlas is kind of out the door, there's a chance there to kind of start kicking that off. Up until that point, it is quite difficult because there's still things kind of flying around. So once Atlas is out the door, I'll kind of start that process of engaging with the community around the kind of roadmap and planning. Particularly a kind of identification of, I mean, this is something that the community can start doing now. You don't have to wait for me. But start kind of identifying the research areas, start identifying the kind of like features and that sort of thing. I think at the moment it's very important to probably have an open mind initially. That kind of like divergent thinking kind of initially, and then you kind of like converge in on what's possible. But it's always good to go kind of like divergent first. Get those ideas out there, so get as many ideas as possible in terms of the. And I think a lot of it is kind of what should be the focal areas over the next few months. Identify what those are, and then start kind of we can start kind of working through those and figuring out kind of. I mean, in some sense, the grant proposal stuff is a good place for that as well, because that obviously a lot of that stuff is kind of latent demand from the community. But yeah, no, I think there's definitely the community can already kind of start doing that. The identification of the sort of areas that we should be focusing on over the next few months, and then once Atlas is out the door, I can start kind of collating that from a team perspective, and then figuring out what we're going to work on, what the community can work on, and where we may need kind of outside support and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, perfect. And then I know one of the things that maybe it's on your desk, maybe it's on Dave's desk, but I'll just keep asking for all the community members I know that are so interested in it. Maybe you can guess what I'm going to ask about, but supposedly there was a rumor of about some positions coming open in Rocket Pool, but is that true? And when will we see those?
Yeah, so we are kind of finishing off the PD. The only issue that we have with getting the PD out is that as soon as we do the PD, that with the hiring, you have to kind of like put the PD out, and then you're going to get this like flood of applications, and then you need to start processing those applications in a timely manner. And right this second, we don't have that capacity to do that. Again, post Atlas, that's kind of when we have the time to kind of do that. So that is when we'll do that. Ideally, depending on how kind of Atlas is going and running that week, we will kind of be able to do it next week. That kind of like depends on what's kind of up in the air at that particular time. But that's what we're kind of trying to aim for is kind of having a PD out by next week.
Oh wow, that's excellent to hear. I know a number of people will be very interested in that. So excellent. Any other things on Atlas, I guess, from the community? I don't know if we have anybody else with their hands up, and I'll get my computer to come back from sleep mode so I can look at trading. But any things either from you or Mav that are Atlas specific that we didn't cover that we should spend some time talking about? Or any questions from the community about Atlas? It's like you said, we're less than 100 hours away, and
So now's the time to ask.
I don't see any questions, Ken. Maybe you've helped us to do such a great job of explaining it that everything's clear. One thing that I will point out is that just like with Redstone, we're going to be having a live stream that's hosted by our friends at ETHstaker. That's the next event call that we have planned. You can check the details in Discord in the event section. We still have to get that link put in there, but you'll be able to join and enjoy the launch of Atlas, which reminds me, I have to go and buy some beers later today.
Wait a minute. Wait. Why are you pulling the short string? It should be Langers that's buying the beers.
Maybe we can discuss that on our team stand-up later today.
Yeah, we would definitely talk about that.
Yeah, somehow I still have it down. You owe us a shoey in there for you, so you better find a shoe too. All right, Langers, what about from your end? Anything that we haven't covered that you feel we should spend a little bit of time for it? You've certainly been on the circuits here, talking with ETHstakers and a number of protocols. I feel like you've probably done twice as many calls for other protocols talking about Rocket Pool than you have the community calls here, at least this week.
Yeah, it's been very busy on the media circuit. I think that's kind of to be expected with Chapella kind of coming up. With Atlas, I think we will see a bit of that as well. But yeah, so it's definitely busy from that perspective. But it's good to get it's good, and actually it's quite fun getting the word out to people about what's going on in terms of Atlas and with Rocket Pool. So no, I don't mind doing that at all. So no, in terms of Atlas. Yeah, there's not much to kind of else to kind of go into. You know, there's not really much else to go into apart from the date and yeah, and to make sure you're upgraded. Actually, that's actually the one thing you should say. I mean, actually, Chapella was the big one. So if you haven't upgraded by now,
yeah, I was going to say if you haven't upgraded now, you got a problem, right?
you probably know the testing.
Yeah.
So that's that. You definitely needed to do that. But yeah, no. So I think we've kind of covered pretty much everything.
Tell me one more thing. I was just looking back through my show notes here. Tell me about, we were talking before a couple of the questions came in from the audience here about the rETH, kind of the setting on there for the 1% and the spillover, right? But really that ETH is just absolutely reserved for the redemption in there, right? So you know, we're not going to see the spillover back until it actually kind of overflows back into the deposit pool, right? So I think you know, I think one of the interesting dynamics that does create is it creates this, you know, as you said, it's kind of a drag on the APR, a little bit of resistance in there because it holds ETH unstaked and reserved only for unstaking. But it also then does add kind of you know, a little bit of an anchor or a little bit of weight to keep us on peg on the protocol redemption, right? So it's going to be very, I think, difficult to recreate a premium or a discount in the market, right? Because our bots could just simply go to the rETH contract and redeem from there. You had mentioned that there's a little bit of logic. It first tries to redeem from there, and if it can't redeem from there, then to the deposit pool. Is that something that Nick has done on the front end of the site, or is that actually part of the underlying contract in the way that it actually executes the smart contract? Where does that priority come from redeeming ETH as to what contract it comes out of, the deposit pool or the rETH contract?
So what it does is it tries to get it from the rETH contract, and if there's more, hang on, let me just double check this. If there's more, ETH required. Yeah. So so basically, if there's it'll try to take it from the rETH contract. If there's not enough in the rETH contract, then it'll actually withdraw from the deposit pool to kind of do that. And then obviously, if there's not enough in the deposit pool, it will actually fail. But that's essentially kind of how it works. Is it tries to burn from the rETH contract, or sorry, unstake from the rETH contract. If there's not enough, it tries to get it from the deposit pool.
And maybe you said it and I just missed it. That's in the smart contract, or that's actually in the logic on the front end that Nick programmed.
That's actually in the smart contract. Yeah.
In the smart contract. Okay. So it doesn't matter how they come into it. That's how it's trying to redeem the ETH for the rETH, and that I guess it's a burn mechanism that happens.
Yes, that's it, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And there's another question in here from Nick. You mentioned back about the position descriptions or the PDs. How many positions, or do you have kind of a summary of what they are? There's seems to be a little bit of interest now in people. Any kind of foreshadowing as to what they might be, technical, non-technical?
So there's going to be 2 positions, but one may not go to the open market because we may already have someone for that position already. So there's going to be a technical role that will go to the open market, and that will go to the open market. So that's basically a developer role, pretty much kind of like a Joe 2.0, and then there is a kind of like a BD role, which we're kind of like umming and ahhing about, because there's actually somebody that we could potentially pick up to kind of like do that. So, but there'll potentially be 2 positions, but one of them may just go to market.
Oh, excellent. That's excellent news on both. And I know it's always kind of difficult to try to figure out how much, especially in perhaps what might be a bear market or recession, how much to, how much to extend and, make an, open positions, right, and hire versus not hiring, right, during downtimes in there. But it certainly seems like we could use a fair amount of devs, right? It's amazing what you guys have accomplished in there, but it does seem that with kind of the vision and the plans for Rocket Pool, that our visions are much grander than than the number of lines of code that can be written a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we definitely need more people.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think, I've looked through, I think we've covered everything in there. I know you spent a fair amount of time on the ETHStaker call that was last week talking about solo node conversions. That's probably the one thing we didn't really spend a lot of time on. I don't know how many people listening to this community call are in that role for it. The only other thing that I could think to mention, certainly, is if you're listening as just an rETH holder, it's the same story, either post-Shapella, pre-Atlas, or post-Atlas. There's nothing you need to do. Just hold and use rETH, and really most of this call is about the node operators.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So as an rETH holder, nothing really changes. Eventually, the APR might be slightly higher because we're recycling ETH, but that's there's not much different really.
Yeah. And I missed the first couple of minutes on it, but from a post-Shapella, kind of day after, kind of watching the withdraw queue, I think most of it is probably the Kraken's staking operation that, had made an agreement to, to kind of exit from that industry because of some of their past practices, right? Any opinion or takes from what you're seeing kind of post-Shanghai and what it might mean to Rocket Pool? The entry queue has been pretty low. There hasn't really been a reshuffling. Maybe the Kraken stakers don't really know that they're not earning anymore, and
need to go find another venue to restake if they want to. But any opinions or commentary that you've been talking about, either one of you?
It sounded like the Kraken stuff was moving offshore, but I don't know a huge amount about that stuff. Yeah, no, I think, to be honest, we're not going to really know the full, like, it's only really been one day. We're not really going to know properly yet what I guess the long-term trend is. So I think we definitely need to get some more kind of data points to kind of see what that long-term trend is. Particularly as a lot of people are kind of saying, Ethereum staking, certainly from like a large institutional perspective, large institutions don't move very quickly, and so even they're not going to be there on day one, of like Shapella being live. But there are a lot of people kind of waiting on the sidelines that haven't been staking up until this point, but will end up kind of staking, and so we'll kind of see that coming in, but it's going to take some time for that to kind of happen. Not everyone's going to jump in on kind of like day one or even day 10.
Yeah, excellent, Mav. What about from your perspective? Any kind of post Shanghai day after thoughts?
I think it's going to be interesting to monitor the balance between the two sides of the protocol, especially when it comes to media and marketing stuff. Most of the time I've been with Rocket Pool, there's been a push for node operators, right? The liquid staking deposit pool queue has been very long, maxed out, and of course that continues today. But depending on how things evolve over the coming weeks, there may be more work required on the liquid staking side or the node operator side. Of course, we kind of still maintain the belief that in the long term, there will be constraints on the node operator side, but who knows? In between now and then, as we know, things can change from day to day. So the ability to withdraw obviously creates some pretty significant benefits and opportunities for Rocket Pool, but it does mean that the entire staking space is suddenly very flexible. So something that needs to be actively monitored more so than in the past, I think, but exciting to be kind of heading into this new frontier and see how it develops. Regardless, I'm pretty confident, optimistic, excited about how it's going to play out. Certainly a lot of potential for Rocket Pool. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're kind of reaching the end here. I suppose one other public service announcement is there were 2 minor updates. If you are listening to this and you made it all the way through today's call, there's 2 minor updates. I believe one for Lighthouse and one for Prism post Shanghai, both to kind of improve some performance issues they saw. Joe has kind of the instructions to do that. I guess that manual upgrade using the TUI in the protocol channel. So check that out if you haven't seen that, or if you were like I went to bed early last night. They're out. But with that, maybe we call it a wrap on today's AMA.
I think so. Sounds good. Thanks for doing another great job hosting, Ken. Thanks, Langers, for coming up on stage relatively early in the morning in Australia to help cater for our European listeners or people in those time zones. Just like the previous AMA and most of our calls here on Twitter Spaces, there will be a recording up on YouTube, hopefully within a few hours later today. So if you join partway through, you'll be able to catch up on not only the start of this call, but also, if you like, the previous AMA, which was a little bit longer. Maybe went into some of the more fundamentals, might be helpful. That's live on YouTube now. But apart from that, look forward to seeing everyone on the live stream in a few days for the launch of Atlas.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you very much, everybody.